Singit lagang di talang. I would first like to honor and acknowledge the Duwamish people, the people of Chief Siath, on whose land we now live, work, and play. My name is Sandra Segundo, and I come from the Haida Nation, and I run the Haida Roots Language Program, which is helping to revitalize our endangered Haida language here in the Seattle area. I would like to share a song that I wrote years ago in our language. It is called Ocean Child. Sigagit udijang, sigagit udijang, diho kyagangs sudanggang. Sigagit udijang, sigagit udijang, spanaya salangaes diho kyagangang. Sigagit udijang, sigagit udijang, diho kyagangs udanggang. Sigagit udijang. Congratulations on 30 years of service and of helping our communities reach our goals.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. A big virtual hug and hello to you all. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate our communities. I see everybody in the chat. Hey, everyone. My name is Eileen Balahadia, and I'm the Neighbor to Neighbor Program Consultant here at the Seattle Foundation, coming to you live from my home here in South Seattle. Living with my family and my young children, I, along with the Seattle Foundation, give thanks and recognize that the Coast Salish people are the original and current stewards of the region, and I recognize the role I need to play in following their stewardship lead and teaching my children to do the same. Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing your talent and preserving the beautiful Haida language for the community. We appreciate partnering with Haida Roots and hearing your warm welcome to tonight's virtual celebration of Neighbor to Neighbor's 30-year anniversary. As you might notice tonight, we're actually not on Zoom or in Teams boxes, but hopefully you'll find this format easy to acclimate to. You have your volume and full screen buttons at the bottom of your screen. And then if you have any technical difficulties, throw them in the chat and we'll hopefully be able to help you. Speaking of chat, you all are experienced chatters because we love for this to be more interactive. So go ahead and sign in and then feel free to chat away. Say hello, say hi, say why you made it here today, why you're joining us tonight. It'd be really good to hear from you. Hey, everyone. Hi, Ahmed. Oh, nice to see you or hear from you. So in addition, we're going to be using a tool tonight called Mentorship Meter. A couple of times today. We'll tell you what to do soon, but it'd be great if you had your smartphone or an alternative device nearby to log on and play along. You can open a new browser on your computer too, but of course, just remember you have to toggle back and forth between our program and the Menti questions. Neighbor to Neighbor is the grassroots grant-making program of the Seattle Foundation. We aim to advance racial equity by supporting organizations led by and serving communities of color and their ability to organize, to engage community, build power, create coalitions, and spread influence. As a place-based funder, we invest in South Seattle, Kent, and White Center primarily, and we aim to foster meaningful connections amongst grantee partners and funders. We hope those connections then lead to more collaboration, peer learning, leveraging more resources, and ultimately towards building a movement for racial justice. To date, Neighbor to Neighbor has granted about $3.4 million to more than 400 organizations, with 100% of them identified as led by and serving Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and all with, at least at one point, operating budgets of $200,000 or less, often much less. Technical assistance, access to capacity building resources, annual convenings, and workshops and trainings round out our program. To share more about Neighbor to Neighbor and the Seattle Foundation, I'm honored to introduce our first speaker tonight, Chris Hermans, the Seattle Foundation's Chief Impact Officer. Hey, Chris.
Good evening, Eileen. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us in this special moment of celebration. I want to start by taking a minute to acknowledge the founding partners, the donors and funders, program consultants, advisory committee, and community advocates who have been defining and shaping this enduring and beloved resource in our community for 30 years. About 30 years ago, community advocates, including many of you, called out Seattle Foundation for underinvesting in communities of color, for not creating equitable opportunities and access to resources for you, the communities, and the groups you were organizing. In fact, for taking part in perpetuating inequities by not doing enough. So in response to that community criticism, Seattle Foundation's involvement in helping to collectively launch Neighbor to Neighbor became our first programmatic and dedicated effort to supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color led and rooted groups to build power, to reinforce the importance of self-determination, and propose creative solutions that counter generations of racism and deep racialized inequities. These principles, which have been core to Neighbor from the beginning, have now come to be the values deeply woven in all of Seattle Foundation's strategic grant making and partnerships, including the likes of Vibrant Democracy Initiative, Communities of Opportunity, which is a partnership with King County, and the Resilience Fund, to just name a few. And when Seattle Foundation helped to launch one of the first COVID-19 response funds last year, these ideals immediately became the cornerstone of the response fund. Then, building on that critical work, the Fund for Inclusive Recovery has been created with a focus specifically on centering Black, Indigenous, people of color led, rooted groups, movements, and coalitions to continue to build the sustained community power and to design community-defined solutions that advance racial and economic equity through long-term policy and systems change. All of you have been a part of building that pathway. And while we're here to celebrate the incredible 30-year legacy of Neighbor to Neighbor, the 400 groups, the $3.4 million awarded, I also just want to lift up and reinforce the transformative, far-reaching, and sustained impact that Neighbor has had on many, fueling a sense of belonging and reimagined possibilities for an equitable region now. So with my deep appreciation for each of you, for your leadership, and for the advocates who have come before you, thank you. Seattle Foundation wouldn't be the organization it is without you, with your guidance, and with your critical partnership. Now I'll turn it back to Eileen so she can continue with this evening's program. And as I do want to elevate Eileen's leadership and thank her for her thoughtful, strategic, heart-filled advocacy for Neighbor to Neighbor and all of our communities. I have learned much by being in your presence and watching you guide this work in partnership with the community advocates tonight. So thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Your words mean so much. I mean, I've personally seen so much stretch and growth at the foundation since your arrival, and we all know how challenging systemic change is. So thank you. I'd love to next introduce Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, representing Washington's 7th Congressional District.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I'm honored to represent Washington's 7th Congressional District in the House of Representatives, where I also serve as chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Thank you to Neighbor for inviting me to share a few words today to celebrate your 30 years of serving our communities. As the first South Asian American woman ever elected to the House and one of only 24 naturalized citizens serving in Congress, I know how important it is to have diverse voices in places of leadership, in the rooms and the Zooms where decisions are made. In fact, 20 years ago, when a brand new grassroots effort was just getting started to protect the rights of immigrant communities of color following the September 11th attacks, Neighbor to Neighbor took a chance on that effort before many other funders did. That small seed turned into One America, the largest immigrant advocacy organization in Washington state. And I, as the founder and executive director for almost 12 years of that organization, am eternally grateful to you for providing that seed funding and investing in communities of color. Your longtime focus on advancing racial justice and your commitment to economic equity through investing in our Black, Brown, and Indigenous neighbors and community members continues to be absolutely critical as racial injustice and inequity continues. Neighbor to Neighbor's funding says to grassroots activists and advocates everywhere, we believe in you. You know the problems and you know the solutions. That support is just invaluable to guide us down the most just path. Our voices are powerful, and when we all come together to fight for what is right, to fight for what is just, and to fight for each other, we are unstoppable. So while you all continue your incredible grassroots work, please know that I am working towards those very same goals right alongside you in the halls of Congress. Thank you for everything you do. And congratulations on 30 fabulous years. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Wow. Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal. Your words, really showcase that not only does representation matter, but excellent and principled leadership does too. And I'm just so proud to be part of a legacy that helped to seed such an important organizing effort that led to One America. So how about this? Should we try an interactive portion of the agenda right now? As described earlier, if you have your cell phone nearby, please go to, you see on the screen as well, menti.com. And when you go there, you can type in that code 44731022. And it should take you to the first of our 2 questions tonight. So the question is, can you share the organization or projects that you are a part of or affiliated with? Many of you have already listed that in the chat, but go ahead and enter it there in menti.com. Maybe it's who you work for, who you volunteer with, or who you donate money to. Feel free to enter up to 3 groups or so. And then we'll definitely show the results of this survey later on tonight. Oh, see, I can see Kirkpatrick Family Foundation, First 5 Years and Beyond, Seattle Foundation, thanks to all the colleagues for showing up today, White Center CDA, Para los Niños, Bird Bar. That's awesome. I love it. We'll see the results later. Okay, so next, it's my pleasure to introduce Alice Ito, the Senior Advisor for Equity at the Seattle Foundation, to offer her remarks about Neighbor to Neighbor.
Hi, thank you, Eileen, and thank you to everyone who's been part of Neighbor to Neighbor over the years. It's wonderful thinking back, and for some of us, it seems like Neighbor to Neighbor has always been here, and for others of us, we remember a time before Neighbor to Neighbor. As our elders remind us, it's important for us to know our history and where we came from as we look toward where we're going. So just a bit of the history before Neighbor to Neighbor. Seattle Foundation was like many other community foundations around the country. It had few connections to communities of color and made relatively few grants to groups in low-income communities, as Chris Hermans had mentioned earlier. Fortunately, a large national funder, the Mott Foundation, was concerned about this and made grants to community foundations, including Seattle Foundation, to support grassroots efforts in underserved low-income communities. And this helped Seattle Foundation begin Neighbor to Neighbor. So the foundation brought on Steve Foreman, the first program consultant who did research into community needs and efforts, and he brought together an advising group of which I was a part. And Seattle Foundation began making small grants to groups in Southeast Seattle, which at the time was the lowest income neighborhood. Then Seattle Foundation reached out to other funders and philanthropists, and in a few years, Neighbor to Neighbor was not only a Seattle Foundation funded program, it was a collaborative effort supported by a number of other funders. And why was it called Neighbor to Neighbor? It was because of a belief in the importance and the power of neighbors helping neighbors and community members working together and connecting with each other to make positive changes. I think we see the evidence of that here in this great celebration of the work of all of the community partners. Over the years, Neighbor to Neighbor became known for connecting people in groups, bridging across differences, and building relationships. And Neighbor to Neighbor opened a door to a new way of doing business for funders that was not familiar at the time. It involved a lot of listening on the part of the funders and a lot of paying attention to the concerns and priorities that community members raised up and supporting the work that they felt was most important to do, rather than a top-down approach from the funder perspective. In philanthropy, these are now some of the funder practices that are considered best practices. But Neighbor to Neighbor really began doing these things a long time ago. Now we talk about funders supporting the communities most impacted by inequity, who are closest to the challenges and who are farthest from justice. Neighbor to Neighbor has been doing this for decades. Now funders talk about doing something called trust-based philanthropy. Well, it's over the years, this has been at the heart of Neighbor to Neighbor's work and relationships. And now funders talk about shifting power to those most impacted who are doing the work of positive change. Neighbor to Neighbor has evolved from a collaborative group of funders to a community-led collaborative. And we've been able to do this a lot because of community members who have made the effort and have been willing to tell their stories. Have been willing to act as cultural guides to educate others about their communities and bridge across sometimes very big differences in understanding and perspective. Another crucial ingredient in Neighbor to Neighbor success, which has been mentioned, is our wonderful program consultants. So after our first consultant, Steve Foreman, he was followed by Eunice Letzing. And Eunice brought her deep empathy and her background in community organizing to building relationships and trust. After Eunice, Judy DeBarros came into the role, bringing her deep knowledge of immigrant and refugee communities and issues, together with her experience of the challenges that small nonprofits face. And bringing it up to the present, of course, is Arling, who has continued the best of Neighbor to Neighbor traditions and has helped us evolve to meet the current emerging needs. We owe them so much for making Neighbor to Neighbor what it is today. So thank you all. And I think we all feel, in these times that we're in, there is so much difficulty and so much loss and pain. I do feel we must acknowledge that although we have made some great progress on the challenges such as systemic racism, it's still with us. We see a widening in gaps of wealth and income and access to health, housing, and education. And yet at the same time, we have here the enduring spirit of community, and with all the bright spots of all the work being done by Neighbor to Neighbor partners. So as we hold this celebration, it's really a celebration of everything that's good and positive in our communities. And I want to just end again with many, many thanks to everyone. And now I'll turn it back to Arling.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you so much for your mentorship, your advice, your guidance, your empathy, all of that. And just above all, your unwavering commitment to racial equity. Thank you, Alice. So we actually asked a few more folks from our community to also share their thoughts about Neighbor to Neighbor and its impact on their communities. So first, we're going to hear from Paulina Lopez, and then afterwards, Samit Mel.
My name is Paulina Lopez. I go by She, Heard, and I am currently the executive director of a local nonprofit organization called the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition, which is located here in the South Seattle area. And first of all, I wanted to congratulate Neighbor to Neighbor Seattle Foundation for this 30 years of compassionate work towards organizers, community love that we have had this support with. And I wanted to make sure that I also thank you for all this commitment that you have had through the years. I remember when I started long time ago, when there wasn't a lot of support for community organizers, Neighbor to Neighbor was there to help us give that a sparkle to continue in the movement, to support community and to be there engaging community in the way that makes sense for making improvements and for making a difference. So I wanted to make sure that you know how appreciative we've been through these years, the mentorship, but also the community coalition that we have creating with other organizations. It was wonderful to be surrounded at all times by wonderful mentors, wonderful peers that are doing tremendous work through the years in different capacities, in different organizations, but through Neighbor to Neighbor, we were able to start. So thank you for all these years of commitment and love. And I wish that we can continue doing this partnership. The Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition is a great partner now of the Seattle Foundation through the support of climate work. COVID has been a great way to demonstrate the need that our communities have. And so we have seen the commitment the Seattle Foundation has as well. So I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to tell you how proud I've been to be part of the Neighbor to Neighbor family.
Hello, my name is Sumit Mel. I use he, him pronouns. I am American, ethnically Khmer Cambodian. I identify as LGBTQ and 1.5 generation refugee. I've been in several different roles transitioning through various orgs such as CERC, Spirit Rachana, Cambodian American Community Council of Washington State, and in the Khmer community, and the County International Airport Community Coalition, Mount Baker Housing Association, and Equity Education Coalition. Today, I'm highlighting the work I do with Spirit Rachana. We're based in Seattle, King County, with work also being done in Cambodia. Spirit's vision is to be a platform and network in connecting folks through civics, dialogue, arts, and policy. We believe that every person's voice is a catalyst for greater change. We do this by educating, elevating, and establishing conversational infrastructure through programs and partnerships. We've pivoted to support our community impacted by COVID-19. It's really exciting to be able to provide workshops such as the Model Minority Myth Workshops, how to find and schedule the COVID-19 vaccine, and anti-Asian hate and bias conversations. We've been involved in digital equity work where we have connected with 45 families on their needs for digital hardware, software, and broadband. This has been really helpful, especially in the pandemic. Another excitement is preparing for our annual Spirit Rachana delegation to Cambodia, where our delegation connects with civic sectors, creatives, policy experts, dignitaries, and the U.S. Embassy in Cambodia. Our upcoming summit track with Sustainable Seattle in the fall 2021 will highlight significant conversations and panels on issues that impact our communities. N2N has been a significant source of support and technical assistance in opening up the doors for very small, nimble grassroots such as ours to step into the community arena. Our relationship with Seattle Foundation wouldn't have happened without the relationship building phases we've had with N2N. N2N's crucial impact has been connection, relationships, and community building. The flexibility that N2N provides to orgs helps to alleviate many of the barriers to organizing and leadership building. The way that N2N operates addresses the myriad of needs that small orgs have. Again, N2N has been a vital role in opening doors and connecting medium-sized and larger funders to underserved community orgs. In a pandemic, relationships matter the most, and N2N has followed through on delivering services while anchoring BIPOC, immigrant, and refugee, and LGBTQ plus hyper-marginalized communities. A big congratulations to Seattle Foundation's N2N program for 30 years of exemplary service and commitment in supporting the growth of our underserved CBOs. We are happy to be part of the N2N family.
You see how lucky I am to be able to work with such awesome organizers and leaders. I mean, I think that's what's really so cool about Neighbor to Neighbor. We invest in organizations, obviously, but also great leaders with really good ideas and really support their organizing efforts to lead, which is just terrific. Let's try this Mentimeter thing again, if it's okay with you all. Come back to your cell phone again. This is the same website, menti.com, and the same code, 44731022. So I'd love for you to just enter in that menti.com, what's one word that would describe neighbor to neighbor for you? Let's see. I mean, for me, I think of words like family, community, authenticity, good food. Well, technically good food is 2 words, but it's true. Speaking of food, I really hope that you all registered, who registered early, got your Grubhub gift card and are able to order dinner tonight, and that you're eating food right now. And if you don't, and you're saving it for later, make sure you order something by tomorrow, I think is the expiration date. Go ahead and enter that one word in, and hopefully we can show the results of that later on this evening. How about, let's do some more chatting. This is a very chatty group. I love it. So I don't have to do a lot of encouraging here, but let's do a little bit of trivia. How does that sound? I don't have any prizes, but just for fun. Let's start with something easy, okay? And this is easy so long as you're good at math. What year was Neighbor to Neighbor founded? Who's going to be the first one to chat it up? Oh, Chris got a typo there, so I can't give you credit. Xandra, 1991, you're right. 30 years, 1991. Okay, that was the easy one. Let's do something a little harder. What was the first neighborhood that we began investing in? Is it South Seattle, Kent, or White Center? Of course, everyone's coming through with the right answers. Chris says White Center. What else do people got? That's not correct. Kent? Process of elimination, folks. No one's getting in the chat. Thank you, Steve. Of course, the original person. South Seattle is correct. South Seattle. Actually, and if you heard Alice's remarks earlier, she mentioned it was originally Southeast Seattle. And then we pretty soon after that expanded to all of South Seattle. So that was the first neighborhood that we began investing in. Good try, everybody. Let's just do one more, okay? Okay, this is a good one. Which organization received their first grant from Neighbor to Neighbor? Okay, which of these organizations received their first grant from Neighbor to Neighbor? Is it Colectiva Legal, Open Doors for Multicultural Families, the Obumwe Women's Association, or all of the above? Do you hear the groups? Colectiva Legal, Open Doors for Multicultural Families, Obumwe Women's Association, or all of the above? Okay, Sharon. Hey, Sharon says Colectiva. David says Open Doors. Ah, there's the alls. Alls, all. A little bit of a trick question. Yeah, all of the above. All of those groups got their first grants from Neighbor to Neighbor, which is pretty awesome. Okay, thanks for playing along, everybody. Now, I'd like to keep us moving and introduce Cathleen Pierce, an original Neighbor to Neighbor funder with the Kirkpatrick Family Foundation and an advisory committee member, to offer some words of reflection. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, and thank you, Eileen, and thanks to all of you who are celebrating Neighbor to Neighbor this evening. This is fun. So our small family foundation has been a funding member of the Neighbor to Neighbor board for 25 years. I've been involved almost as long as Alice, but not quite. We joined in 1996 after the Seattle Foundation reached out to engage local community supporters at the end of the Mott funding. Now, 25 years is a long time to be involved in any collaboration. I've been part of a number of collaborative funding groups. None has survived as long or been as consistently effective as Neighbor to Neighbor. So why is this true? Well, I think there are three reasons the model has worked so well for so long. First, we've stayed focused on our core mission of providing small grants and other support to community leaders who are best able to tackle significant inequities. We got on the right train from the start, and we're still riding on it. Second, we've resisted neighbor to neighbor. We've resisted taking on more than we can manage well. We haven't overstretched. Third, we have been a learning organization. We are not afraid to admit mistakes. We've made some. We've been willing to seize a few strategic opportunities that helped us really leverage our limited resources. So, for example, in 1998, we listened to leaders of small grassroots organizations, probably some of you who are joining us tonight, about your need for trainers and consultants who looked like you and understood your unique challenges. Then we worked with community partners to launch Nonprofit Assistance Center, now Communities Rise. Over the years, we also launched several larger grant programs to tackle displacement and promote equitable development, to address organizational capacity issues, and to promote racial equity. During the last few years, Neighbor to Neighbor has also turned inward, learning how to be a more trustworthy partner. As Alizito said, we've added more community voices and partners to our board. And so our board now looks a lot more like the communities we serve. We explored our own biases and recently revamped our application, committed to model the kind of community trust we've always felt. So to sum up, this may be the most important philanthropic work I've done. I could never do this tough work alone, on my own. Besides, I've made great friends I deeply respect, and I've had a lot of fun. Back to you, Eileen. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. So poignant. Thank you so much. It's actually just really pretty amazing when you think about how lucky that we've been to have this continuity of leadership over 2-3 decades that you and Alice both showcase. So thank you so much. Now let's hear from some more community members. I'm excited to bring on 2 more folks. First, we'll have Reverend Jimmy James and then Susan Balbus shortly after.
Hi, I'm Reverend Jimmy James, and I'm the Executive Director of Being Empowered Through Supportive Transitions. Our mission is to provide direct services for most vulnerable communities while at the same time promoting equity in systems and policy change. First, I want to say happy 30th anniversary, Neighbor to Neighbor. I'm excited today as we with BEST are working with a strong collaborative in City of Kent, helping youth with trauma-informed practices, but also working with another organization and a group that are the steering committee for a community-led driven policy council. These things would not be possible only because of the relationship that I began with Neighbor to Neighbor that spans from a time when I first started as an organization called Hope, Holistic Opportunities for Empowerment in 2012, where they funded my first event, which was called Housing for the Homeless, Hope Housing for the Homeless, where we're able to do a big, large forum with all type of housing providers, the city, community, and it included homeless individuals who were able to speak upon the plight, and all the way to today to 2019, pre-COVID, where we were part of the Advanced Racial Equity Project, and they helped fund a project, one of my great ideas and inspirational projects that was called, we created the Kent Tenants Association, to where a lot of Kent community organizations and people came together to fight the eviction with the just cause, and bringing people together in the community. Is that before we got to this moratorium, they were still evictions, and all of those things led to our organization growing. We got to the point to where we were able to put on an event, and they funded for us, called Raise the Standard, where we de-escalate Washington, where it was focusing on the issue with people in our community, and addressing police violence to our BIPOC communities. Our organization BEST was able to move forward and to grow. I remember going back when Neighbor to Neighbor held one of their convenings, and the Kent organizations all came together, and we had a dream and we had a vision about what would it look like if all of these Kent organizations were able to come together. And that was a goal and a hope that we were trying to do. Well, today, that's what's actually happened. There are all types of groups and organizations that Neighbor to Neighbor have funded in the city of Kent and South King County that are making major impacts. What I want to say is a vision realized. Neighbor to Neighbor, powerful words. What Neighbor to Neighbor has done when it comes to funding and philanthropy, what they have done, they have had the courage to change. They had the foresight to move forward with equity. They had the nerve to say no to the status quo. When we talk about seeing who can really do the work, Neighbor to Neighbor was able to see that the grassroots organizations not only had the passion to serve, but they also had the perseverance and the resilience and the professionalism to perform, even when they didn't have the funding. But Neighbor to Neighbor, you came along and you helped make it easy for BEST. You have made it easier for the other organizations, because you supported us with the funding when no one else would. Neighbor to Neighbor, you just don't have a mission. What you have, you live your mission. You know what? I would literally go out and tell organizations who I knew were doing the work, I would say, go and apply to Neighbor, because they'll give you a fair chance. They'll listen to you, they'll help you. And you know what? These people actually went out and they would come running back to me and they would say, hey, I got the grant. You were right. I got the grant. Neighbor to Neighbor funded that. Do you know what that does to organization who are struggling? Do you know the boost that you give them? Do you know that what you start doing was setting and building a foundation of fiscal hope for these grassroots organizations? Neighbor to Neighbor, you have done that for the past 30 years. In the final analysis, here's what I believe, and it's clear to me that the work of Neighbor to Neighbor is a true, authentic leader in changing the culture of philanthropy. It's changing the culture of funding that reflects a new era of giving. I call it a movement of equity, a movement of justice that recognizes that the expertise and the effectiveness and the power of community is right here in front of our faces, especially with our BIPOC communities and organizations. And so what I want to say, a job well done, Neighbor to Neighbor. Happy anniversary on your for 30 years of equity service.
Greetings, this is Susan Balas, founder and executive director of Na'a Fund, based in Seattle, Washington. We want to give a big shout out today to Neighbor Fund of Seattle Foundation for 30 years of service and amazing impact that they've been able to produce and catalyze in South Seattle, mostly in low-income communities and communities of color. Thank you for your leadership, your vision, your commitment. Thank you most to Judy DeBarros and to Eileen Balahadia for your continuing support of community leaders. Na'a received funding from Neighbor to Neighbor back during the economic downturn when we were really struggling. And because of your support and that of others, we have grown now to a multi-million-dollar fund, and thanks to Seattle Foundation for amazing support of us, and we are just so thankful and grateful. And go Neighbor to Neighbor. Here's to another 30 years. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Arling Martinez Vasquez, and I have had the privilege to serve as Trial and Errors Creative Director for our involvement in the 30-year anniversary celebration of Neighbor to Neighbor. Since January this year, 9 individuals from Trial and Error, the South Seattle Emerald, and some other freelance artists we found and roped in have been working in interviewing representatives from 30 organizations and then creating videos that really showcase their work. These videos can be found in the Seattle Foundation Facebook page and I believe their YouTube channel. So I hope you'll look them up and have a look. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce to you a longer video we put together showcasing gems from all 30 of these interviews. We really hope that you enjoy the video. It really has been a labor of hope and joy for so many of us involved, which I believe not only showcases Neighbor to Neighbor, but it's also core to what it really means to be in community. In every single one of these interviews, a common thread was that no matter the challenges that are thrown at our communities of color, hope and joy can always be found when we stand together and witness each other. So I hope you enjoy our work. And if you feel moved and have the means, that you contribute to the Neighbor to Neighbor program, because your dollars will go directly to the hands of real experts in what community justice and racial equity looks like, which is our community itself. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the video.
Somali Family Safety Task Force.
Communities Rise.
Southeast Seattle Education Coalition.
VQ.
Nurturing Roots. Villa Comunitaria.
Rainier Beach Action Coalition.
Haida Roots.
Mujer al Volante, Superación Constante.
Para los niños.
Mother Africa.
Egypt. Gagari.
One America.
Brothers United in Leadership Development.
Eat with Muslims.
Open Doors for Multicultural Families.
Kenya Women's Association.
Filipino Community of Seattle.
Somali Community Service of Seattle.
Yes Foundation.
Eritrean Association in Greater Seattle.
The Khmer Community of Seattle, King County.
Iraqi Community Center of Washington.
Pacific Islander Community Association of Washington.
White Center Community Development Association.
The Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition.
Black Holidays Task Force.
Colectiva Legal del Pueblo.
Utopia. We're striving for a healthy, equitable environment for people and also wildlife.
We are committed to address basic needs, maintaining the cultural value of Eritreans and the other East African refugees and immigrants.
Support African refugees and immigrant women and their families to reach their highest potential.
To reimagine agriculture for Black folks, a source of healing and not a source of trauma.
Our mission is to find ways to economically empower Black communities.
Our mission is to address the critical issues that affect the well-being of residents in Rainier Beach.
Our work is to address both the basic safety of our community and the systems and policies and beliefs that makes us unsafe.
Creating visibility and space for LGBTQ Vietnamese folks.
Neighbor to Neighbor is one of the biggest seed funds that supports community-based organizations like ours.
Neighbor to Neighbor is really special. It's really based on relationship building and capacity building in the community.
Our experience with Neighbor to Neighbor dates back to when we were just starting out as an organization.
I have not seen one organization that cares that much. Even when you're talking to them about the grant, they will help you. They will give you technical support if they can.
Now when they do site visit, we really like it and we get a lot of support and we have the chance to explain what the need for the community.
There's a flexibility there, and I think that's very important, for grassroots organizations.
Las organizaciones no se tienen que adaptar a lo que Neighbor to Neighbor quiere. Neighbor to Neighbor siempre se adapta a las necesidades de las organizaciones.
Neighbor to Neighbor is one of our first 2 grants we received, and today we have more than 47 staff.
Neighbor to Neighbor has been an amazing support in moments that the organization needed the most. And today we have 18 staff and 5 different programs.
The neighbor to neighbor, they understand more of the small non-privates.
Neighbor to Neighbor is an incubator for helping new nonprofits get off the ground. These are the nonprofits that are closest to the community, coming up from communities of color.
They trust us as community members that we could really make an impact in our community because we were part of the community.
I'm expert in the African community because I understand the culture, I understand the fears, they will open up to me. That's what creating trust is about.
It's not just the money, it's the belief in a vision and in the power of something new.
Neighbor to Neighbor acknowledges the power of community.
And community's everything, you know what I mean? It's like, if you ain't got community, we don't got nothing.
My struggles and my pain and challenges, it keeps me going, and which drives me to continue to do good for community, for our queer babies, for our youth, our future generations, and then also for a better tomorrow.
Changing somebody's life, you can't, it don't get no better than that.
We envision a world where young people are free to be their whole selves and have the relationships and healing they need to live and thrive.
The Colectiva's dream, it's not to have this system in place that we have to fight against.
The world that we would like to create in our community is, number one, is peace, loving, get to know, trust each other.
Ensuring that the community is empowered both politically and culturally.
Just hearing our babies speak our language freely.
All of our young people to be able to see themselves as leaders in their community and be able to make the change that they want to see.
Where queer and trans people don't need to pick one identity over another, and where we can just authentically be ourselves.
The world that we're wanting to create is a world that is really guided by our ability to love on each other.
And so that's really our goal, right? Wellness, building power, building cultural home.
Wow, that video was really amazing. Thank you, Arlene. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you to the entire Trial and Error Productions team for your pro bono support of this amazing storytelling effort. I know that we're all virtual. We can't be together, but here you go. You just had 30 amazing, wonderful people join us tonight and really just express, I love that love and that wellness, and that really that's the joy that we find in community that we care so much about. Gosh, that was so great. I know it's not hard to take 30 videos and narrow it down into one succinct compilation. So thank you so much. We're nearing the end of the program, but let's go ahead and take a look now at some of the results of that interactive activity that we did on menti.com. Oh, awesome. It's coming up now. Great. Look at that. We've got all kinds of folks here. The Emerald, Amigos de Seattle, Yes Foundation, Village of Hope, Community Passageways, Our Future Matters, Black Farmers Collective, Duwamish Tribe, thank you, Parajeep. This is great. The Residency, 21 Progress. I love it. And maybe we can check out next, what's that one word that describes us? Okay, not surprising. You've got community as the biggest one here. Family, thank you. That was my word. I love it. Solidarity. You've got a call out to immigrants, relationships, impactful. That's awesome. Partner, opportunity, bomb.com. I love that one. That's great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for playing along and for helping us with that. You know, for me, obviously I've said it before, I think of Neighbor to Neighbor as one big family, one big, diverse, lively family with lots of talents, you know, an abundance of passion and wealth and character. The folks you heard from tonight and so many more are who make what Neighbor to Neighbor what it is and what it has been for the last 30 years. I'd just love to formally thank some of those folks now, if that's okay. Our Neighbor to Neighbor Advisory Committee. We are this intentional mix of community and partners and funders that are committed to supporting community, listening to community, adjusting when needed, and working together to break down barriers. They include the folks listed here on this slide. And I'm laughing at my own unsophisticated design skills here because I just grabbed people's photos from Facebook. So thank you to our advisory committee. We also operate as a funders collaborative, and we have so from the very beginning. As Kathleen stated earlier, no one funder can do this alone, right? So thank you to all the current and past donors and funders to Neighbor who make us all work and tick and function. It's been mentioned already, but I, you know, as a programs consultant, I follow in the footsteps and legacy of 3 others. Thank you, Steve Foreman, Eunice Letzing, and Judy DeBarros for your counsel, your allyship, and for setting a strong foundation by which we respectfully and authentically work with community. I also often want to offer deep thanks to the community advocates that are our grassroots organizers in the field. So thank you, Patrice, Riham, Soka, and Tracy. Lastly, to our Neighbor to Neighbor communities, to you all today, you inspire me daily. I mean, I feel so lucky to be able to do this work. I say this all the time, to be able to learn from you and your perspective and to truly live out my own servant leadership values. Thank you for trusting me to share your stories and to advocate for your good work. For those of you who are interested in seeing more about Neighbor to Neighbor's 30-year history, we have worked with our media partner, South Seattle Emerald, to produce a history booklet covering our decades-long history and documenting the 400-plus organizations and projects we've supported over the years. Printed copies will be available, and the digital copy will be online soon as well on our webpage. Special shout out to Sharon Maeda and Marcus Green. I think you're both here on the chat as well. Thank you so much for your support of that project. So now I have the pleasure of introducing someone who may not need an introduction, my friend Celie Savusa, the Executive Director of the White Center Community Development Association and also a Neighbor to Neighbor Advisory Committee member. Hey, Celie. Oh, shoot. We practiced we practiced that fist bump. Sorry. Oh.
Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm glad I was muted because I couldn't stop crying over the video. It was so powerful, and just to be, the work, you know, everybody spoke to it tonight. Paulina, Samate, Susan, and, you know, and then Reverend James came on here and took us to church, right? So I'm very honored to be here to say a few closing words. And I guess what I want to say is Neighbor to Neighbor to me is almost like a rite of passage that many of us have been a part of. Doing the work from the ground up is the most sound way to work in community. And to watch the growth of the community as a result of the foundation that Neighbor to Neighbor has helped build for community, it's just really special. When the CDA, by the way, welcome from White Center. When the CDA started almost 20 years ago we received quite a few neighbor to neighbor grants. And it's that seed funding that you heard many people talk about that really helped to affirm who we are as communities of color, and help us step into our own leadership in building and doing the work the way that the community sees it. I just, there were a lot of stories. I think mine holds the values that you all shared with everybody tonight. And, I cannot believe that video got me crying, you guys. You see how amazing Neighbor to Neighbor has been to really elevate and highlight the 30 years of badass grassroots organizing over the last 30 years. You just can't top that. And, but I do know that I do have some business to take care of. The funding for Neighbor to Neighbor, we hope to grow this work in 2022. Our goal is to raise an additional $300,000. If we could raise $3.4 million, we can raise another $300,000 to expand, hopefully, and continue this work next year. I don't know what else to say. Seriously, I don't know what else to say except for, I think Alice alluded to this. If you believe in community, we will move mountains. All we're asking for is the opportunity for funding, for systems, to believe in community. And I think that's one of the most important things that Neighbor to Neighbor has done in really holding that space to really bring our dreams alive as a grassroots community. The last thing I want to say is that thank you, Neighbor to Neighbor, for helping to reimagine how philanthropy relates to community. Because we in the community who have been doing this work for many years, and the folks whose shoulders that we stand on, we've always believed that although Neighbor to Neighbor brings an abundance of resources, we always knew that the community has abundance of wealth that has been here for generations. So thank you for allowing us to be the leaders that we are, to continue to carry the work for the babies who will follow us, and to really speak into the future and the wisdom of communities. So happy 30 Neighbor to Neighbor to all of you guys. I'll see you later. Make sure everybody gets vaccinated. And I'm going to turn it back over to my good friend and fellow badass, Arling.
Thank you, Celie.
That's what happens when I go live.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. You are the realist. You're always this way. I love it. Thank you so much. And thanks for everything you've taught me and mentored me with. And it's so incredible to have your leadership. Okay, so we have now come to the end of our virtual program. In the next few weeks, as a thank you for coming tonight, we'll be hand delivering or mailing a special Community Cares gift box for you, curated from local nonprofits and small businesses from our 3 neighborhoods. So be on the lookout for confirmation on that. I hope you've really enjoyed hearing from our beloved communities tonight. I hope you leave tonight inspired by the work we do, that we can support grassroots communities. And, I hope that you remain hopeful that we will be able to achieve this shared prosperity, belonging, and justice, where all individuals and communities have equitable access and outcomes, regardless of race, place, or identity. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For our closing performance, I'd like to introduce a grantee partner, Milvia Pacheco with Movimiento Afro-Latino Seattle. Have a good night, everyone, and stay safe and well.
Hello, everybody. My name is Milvia Berenice Pacheco Salvatierra, an Afro-Latino artist and also the Executive Director of MAS, Movimiento Afro-Latino Seattle, a community organization with the mission of activate and empower community through art, creating awareness about the history and cultural contribution of Afro-descendants from Latinos, Afro-descendants for social change and racial equity. I'm here with Maestro Silvino playing the berimbau, and we are honored to be here to congratulate N2N on its 30th anniversary. We want to heartily thank all the people on the N2N team for the work that each of you have done during all these years supporting community-based organizations like us. We want to make sure that each of you know that your effort has been creating and providing opportunities for different organizations to collectively build a path to transform our society into a more equitable place. How we say, we are stronger united. Feliz aniversario. Congratulations on your 30 years anniversary.